His breath was warm against my inner thigh, sending shivers through my entire body. I could barely think, barely breathe as his lips traced higher, each kiss deliberate, patient, knowing exactly what he was doing to me. The stars above us seemed to blur as I arched against the rough shingles of the rooftop, my fingers tangling in his hair. "Violet," he whispered against my skin, his voice rough with want. "Tell me to stop." But I couldn't. I wouldn't. This was my stepbrother. This was wrong in every way that mattered, but nothing had ever felt more right. My wedding ring caught the moonlight as my hand pressed against his shoulder, pulling him closer instead of pushing him away. Before we dive deeper into this story, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying what you're hearing. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The night air was cool against my skin as I climbed through the bedroom window onto the roof. I needed space, needed air, needed anything but the suffocating silence of that empty house. Hank had been gone for 2 weeks on his business trip, and the loneliness was eating at me from the inside out. Marriage wasn't supposed to feel this hollow, this distant. At 32, I felt like I was living someone else's life, going through the motions of being the perfect wife while something vital inside me slowly died. The shingles were rough beneath, my bare feet as I made my way to the flat section where Levi and I used to sit as teenagers, back when our parents first got married and we were still figuring out how to be a family. Back when everything was simpler, before I understood the way my pulse quickened whenever he looked at me with those deep, knowing eyes. Couldn't sleep either? His voice made my heart skip. I turned to find Levi climbing up behind me, his movements fluid and sure. At 30, he'd grown into the kind of man who commanded attention without trying, all lean muscle and quiet confidence. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face as he settled beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixing with the night air. "Hank's been gone too long," I said, which was true enough. What I didn't say was that his absence wasn't the real reason I couldn't sleep. It was the dreams. Dreams where familiar hands traced patterns on my skin, where a voice I'd known since I was 18 whispered things that made me wake with my heart racing and my body aching. Levi nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars scattered across the darkness above us. "He travels too much." There was something in his tone, something careful and controlled that made me glance at him. In the pale light, his profile was sharp, beautiful in a way that had always made my chest tight. I'd spent years telling myself it was just appreciation, just admiration for someone I'd grown up with. But sitting here in the darkness, with nothing but honesty between us and the stars, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Do you ever think about how different things might have been? The words slipped out before I could stop them, carried on the cool night breeze. He turned to look at me then, and something shifted in the air between us. His eyes were dark, intense, searching my face like he was looking for permission to say something he'd been holding back for years. "Every day," he said simply. The admission hung between us, heavy with everything we'd never said, everything we'd carefully avoided acknowledging. My breath caught as he reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair away from my face. The touch was gentle, tentative, but it sent electricity racing through my veins. "Violet," he said my name like a prayer, like something sacred and forbidden all at once. I should have pulled away. Should have climbed back through that window and locked the door behind me. Should have called Hank and begged him to come home early. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes falling closed as his thumb traced the curve of my cheek. "We can't," I whispered, but even as I said it, my body was betraying me, leaning closer to his warmth. "I know," he said, but his hand didn't move away. If anything, he touched me more deliberately, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw, the sensitive spot just below my ear that made me shiver. "But I've wanted to touch you like this for so long." His confession broke something open inside me. All those years of carefully maintained distance, of polite family dinners and casual conversations, of pretending I didn't notice the way his eyes lingered on me or the way my body responded to his presence. All of it crumbled in an instant. I turned toward him fully, and suddenly we were so close I could feel his breath against my lips. The space between us felt charged, electric, like the air before a storm. His hand was still cupping my face, his thumb now tracing the curve of my lower lip with maddening gentleness. "Tell me to stop," he said again, his voice rough with restraint. Instead, I closed the distance between us. The first touch of his lips against mine was soft, questioning, giving me one last chance to pull away. But I was done running from this, done pretending I didn't want exactly what was happening. I kissed him back, my hands fisting in the front of his shirt, pulling him closer as years of suppressed desire finally found its voice. He groaned against my mouth, a low sound that sent heat pooling in my core. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my head to deepen the kiss, and I opened for him eagerly. There was nothing gentle about it now, nothing careful or controlled. This was hunger, pure and simple, the kind that had been building between us for years and finally had nowhere left to hide. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed like he was trying to memorize this moment. "This is crazy," I breathed, but I didn't move away. If anything, I pressed closer, needing to feel the solid warmth of him against me. "I know," he said, again, but his hands were already moving, sliding down to my waist, pulling me against him. "But I can't stop, not now." I should have been thinking about my marriage, about the promises I'd made, about the complications this would create. Instead, all I could think about was the way his hands felt against my skin, the way his lips had tasted, the way my entire body was humming with need. He laid me back against the sloped roof, the shingles rough against my shoulders as he braced, himself above me. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to this moment that would change everything between us. His lips found mine again, then traced a path down my throat, making me arch beneath him. "So beautiful," he murmured against my skin, his voice thick with desire. His hands were gentle but sure as they explored, reacquainting themselves with curves he'd only been able to imagine touching. Every caress sent warmth spreading through me, building into something that felt like coming home and falling apart all at once. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched like this, like I was something precious and desired. Hank's touches had become perfunctory over the years, routine gestures between two people who'd forgotten how to really see each other. But this was different. Levi touched me like he'd been dreaming about it, like every brush of his fingers was a gift he'd been waiting years to give. When his mouth found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, I couldn't hold back the soft sound that escaped my lips. He lifted his head to look at me, his eyes dark with want but still searching, still making sure this was what I wanted. "Don't stop," I whispered, my hands sliding up his back, feeling the play of muscle beneath his shirt. "Please don't stop." Something shifted in his expression then, hunger winning out over restraint. His hands moved with more purpose, finding the hem of my nightgown and sliding it up, baring skin to the cool night air. I should have felt exposed, vulnerable, but instead I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. His mouth followed the path his hands had traced, pressing kisses to newly revealed skin, making me gasp and arch beneath him. The rough texture of the shingles against my back was a sharp contrast to the gentle warmth of his lips, creating a sensory overload that had my head spinning. "I've dreamed about this," he confessed against my stomach, his voice muffled but clear, enough to make my heart race even faster. "So many nights, I've dreamed about touching you like this." His admission sent a fresh wave of heat through me. To know that I wasn't alone in this desire, that he'd been fighting the same battle between what we wanted and what we thought we should want, it was both terrifying and liberating. His hands were at my hips now, fingers hooking into the delicate fabric of my underwear. He paused, looking up at me, giving me one more chance to change my mind. But I was past the point of rational thought, past caring about anything except the need building inside me like a fever. I lifted my hips, helping him remove the last barrier between us, and watched his eyes darken as he took in the sight of me bare beneath the stars. The way he looked at me, like I was something miraculous, something he'd been searching for his whole life, made me feel beautiful in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. "Perfect," he breathed, his hands skimming up my thighs with reverent touches that made me tremble. "You're so perfect." When his mouth finally found the place where I needed him most, I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. The sensation was overwhelming, building slowly as he took his time, learning what made me respond, what made my breath catch and my body arch toward him. He was patient, thorough, dedicated to my pleasure in a way that was almost worship. The stars blurred above me as sensation built, layer upon layer, until I was balanced on the edge of something vast and consuming. My hands found his hair, my fingers tangling in the dark strands as I fought to stay grounded, to not lose myself, completely in what he was doing to me. "Let go," he murmured against my skin, the vibration of his voice sending fresh shockwaves through me. "I've got you." And I did. I let go of everything, my guilt, my fear, my carefully constructed life, and tumbled into sensations so intense it felt like dying and being reborn all at once. My body arched off the roof, a cry escaping my lips despite my efforts to stay quiet, and he stayed with me through every wave, every aftershock, until I was boneless and trembling beneath him. When I could finally think again, he was kissing, his way back up my body, his lips finding mine in a kiss that tasted like satisfaction and promise. I could feel him trembling too, could feel the evidence of his own need pressed against my thigh, and suddenly I wanted to return the gift he'd just given me. My hands found the buttons of his shirt, working them open with fingers that shook slightly. From adrenaline and desire, He helped me push the fabric away, and then it was my turn to explore, to map the planes and angles of his chest with my palms, to press kisses to skin that tasted like salt and starlight. He groaned when I found the sensitive spot just below his collarbone, his hips pressing against mine in an involuntary movement that made us both gasp. The friction was delicious, maddening, not nearly enough but somehow too much all at once. Violet, my name was a plea on his lips, rough with need and restraint warring for control. I reached between us, finding him through the fabric of his jeans, feeling him pulse and harden further at my touch. The sound he made, half moan, half prayer, sent liquid heat pooling in my core, making me ache for him all over again. "I need you," I whispered against his throat, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside me. "I need you so much, it hurts." He pulled back to look at me, his eyes searching mine in the moonlight. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." I knew what he meant. This would change everything between us, would complicate our lives in ways we couldn't even begin to imagine. But looking up at him, seeing the want and tenderness and something deeper in his expression, I knew I was already past the point of no return. "I'm sure," I said, my hands moving to his belt. "I've never been more sure of anything." He helped me with the rest of his clothes, and then there was nothing between us but want, and moonlight, and the vast expanse of sky above us. When he settled between my thighs, the weight of him familiar and foreign all at once, I felt like I was coming home to a place I'd never been. The first slow press of him inside me drew sounds from both of us, desperate and needy and utterly real. He paused, letting me adjust, his forehead pressed against mine as we both struggled for control. "Okay?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of holding back. "More than okay," I managed, my legs wrapping around his hips, pulling him deeper. "Don't stop. Please don't stop." And he didn't. He moved with a rhythm that was both gentle and urgent, building sensation between us like a slow-burning fire. Every thrust sent waves of pleasure through me, each one stronger than the last, until I was clinging to him, like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid with sensation. We moved together like we'd been made for this, like our bodies had been waiting years to find this perfect synchronization. The rough shingles scraped against my back with each movement, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered except the way he felt inside me, the way his breath came in harsh pants against my ear, the way he whispered my name like it was the only word. That mattered. The tension built between us, winding tighter and tighter until I thought I might shatter from the intensity of it. His rhythm grew more urgent, more desperate, and I met him stroke for stroke, chasing something that felt just out of reach but getting closer with every movement. "I'm close," I gasped, my nails digging into his shoulders as I felt myself approaching the edge again. "Me too," he managed, his voice rough and breathless. "God, Violet, you feel so good." His words sent me over, pleasure crashing through me in waves so intense I saw stars behind my closed eyelids. I felt him follow, his body tensing as he buried, his face against my neck, my name a broken prayer on his lips. We lay there afterward, still joined, still trembling from the aftershocks. The night air was cool against our heated skin, but I didn't want to move, didn't want to break this perfect moment by acknowledging what we'd just done. Eventually, though, reality began to creep back in. The rough shingles beneath me, the wedding, ring still on my finger, the knowledge that somewhere across the country, my husband was probably asleep in a hotel room, completely unaware that his wife had just irrevocably changed their marriage. Levi seemed to sense my shift in mood. He pulled back to look at me, his eyes soft with concern and something that might have been regret. "Hey," he said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from my face. "Don't do that. Don't disappear on me." "I'm not," I said, but even I could hear the lie in my voice. "Yes, you are. I can see it in your eyes." His thumb traced my cheek, the touch gentle but insistent. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're regretting, don't. Not yet. Just be here with me for a little while longer." I wanted to protest, to tell him about the guilt already creeping in around the edges of my consciousness, about the impossibility of what we'd just done. But looking up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, I found myself nodding instead. We made our way back inside eventually, moving through the quiet house like conspirators. At the door to my bedroom, he paused, his hand on my wrist, stopping me from going inside. "This doesn't have to be just tonight," he said quietly. "I know it's complicated. I know there are things we need to figure out, but I don't want this to be the end." I should have told him it had to be. Should have explained about duty and marriage and all the reasons why this could never happen again. Instead, I found myself nodding, my heart already racing at the thought of touching him again, of feeling him move inside me, of losing myself in sensation the way I had on that rooftop. "Okay," I whispered, the word barely audible but heavy with promise. He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him all night, and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead before disappearing into the darkness of the hallway. I stood there for a long moment, my back against the closed door, trying to process what had just happened. My body still hummed with satisfaction, still carried the phantom touch of his hands, the memory of his mouth on my skin. But underneath the physical afterglow was something deeper, something that scared and thrilled me in equal measure. I was in love with my stepbrother. Had been for years, probably, though I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge it. And now that I'd tasted what it could be like between us, I didn't know how I was going to go back to pretending otherwise. The next morning brought harsh sunlight and the sound of my phone ringing. Hank's name on the caller ID made my stomach clench with guilt, but I forced myself to answer with something approaching normalcy. "Hey, honey," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Morning, beautiful. Did I wake you?" His voice was warm, familiar, completely unaware of how much his wife had changed since they'd last spoken. No, I was already up. The lie came easily, though the truth was I'd barely slept. Every time I'd closed my eyes, I'd felt Levi's hands on my skin, heard his voice whispering my name in the darkness. "Good. I miss you like crazy. This deal is taking longer than expected, but I should be home by the weekend." The weekend. 3 more days of being alone in this house with Levi. 3 more days of fighting the urge to climb back onto that roof and lose myself in his touch again. "I miss you too," I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. I did miss my husband, missed the comfortable familiarity of our life together, but I also knew that when he came home, everything would be different. I would be different, changed by what had happened under the stars, by the knowledge of what I was capable of wanting. After I hung up, I made coffee with shaking hands, trying to convince myself that last night had been an aberration, a moment of weakness that would never happen again. But when Levi appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair still mussed from sleep and his eyes dark with remembered desire, I knew I was lying to myself. "Morning," he said softly, his voice intimate in a way that made my pulse quicken. "Morning," I managed, not trusting myself to say more. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, close enough that the memory of his hands on my body came flooding back with vivid intensity. When he reached past me for a coffee mug, his arm brushed against mine, and I had to grip the counter to keep from turning into his embrace. "Violet," he said my name quietly, a question and a promise all at once. I turned to face him, and the look in his eyes nearly undid me. He wanted me, still. Even in the harsh light of morning, even with all the complications and impossibilities spread out between us, he still wanted me. "Hank called," I said, the words a desperate attempt to rebuild the wall between us. Something flickered in his expression, hurt, maybe, or disappointment. But he didn't step back. "I know you're scared," he said instead. "I know this is complicated, but what happened last night? That was real, Violet. What's between us is real? It doesn't matter," I said, but the words felt hollow even to me. "I'm married. You're my stepbrother. This is impossible." "Is it?" He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Because last night didn't feel impossible. Last night felt like the most natural thing in the world. He was right, and that was what scared me most. Being with him hadn't felt wrong or forbidden. It had felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece of myself I hadn't even known I was looking for. Before I could respond, before I could rebuild my defenses or convince myself that duty was more important than desire, he was kissing me. Soft at first, questioning, but when I kissed him back, because of course I kissed him back, it deepened into something hungry and desperate and absolutely right. My coffee mug hit the counter with a clink as I fisted my hands in his shirt, pulling him closer. He lifted me easily, setting me on the kitchen island, his hands sliding up my thighs as he stepped between my legs. "We shouldn't," I gasped against his mouth, even as my body arched toward his touch. "Probably not," he agreed, his lips finding the sensitive spot below my ear that made me shiver. "But I can't stop wanting you. I've tried, Violet. God knows I've tried." His confession broke the last of my resistance. If he'd been fighting this desire as long as I had, if he'd spent years trying to ignore what was building between us, then maybe we deserved this moment. Maybe we deserved to explore what could have been, even if it was only temporary. My hands found the hem of his t-shirt, pulling it over his head with eager fingers. In the morning light streaming through the kitchen windows, he was even more beautiful than he'd been under the stars. All lean muscle and golden skin, the kind of body that belonged in classical sculptures, not in my kitchen, making me forget every promise I'd ever made. He groaned when I pressed my lips to his chest, when I traced the line of his collarbone with my tongue. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me against him like he was afraid I might disappear. "I want you," I whispered against his skin, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside me. I want you so much I can't think straight. Then don't think, he said, his hands already working at the buttons of my nightgown. Just feel, just be here with me. And I was. I let myself sink into sensation, into the warmth of his hands on my skin, the taste of his mouth, the way he touched me like I was something precious and wild and desperately needed. The kitchen island was hard beneath me, the morning light too bright, but none of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the way he made me feel, alive, desired, completely and utterly myself. When he finally joined with me, when I felt him fill the aching emptiness inside me, I thought I might cry from the sheer rightness of it. This was what I'd been missing, what my marriage had been lacking. Not just physical satisfaction, though that was certainly part of it, but this sense of being truly seen, truly known, truly desired for exactly who I was. We moved together with increasing urgency, chasing something that felt both familiar and completely new. Every thrust sent waves of pleasure through me, each one building on the last until I was trembling on the edge of release. "Look at me," he said, his voice rough with strain. "I want to see you when you come apart." I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze as the tension inside me finally snapped. The orgasm crashed through me like a tidal wave, intense and overwhelming and absolutely perfect. I watched his face change as he followed me over, saw the moment when pleasure took him completely, and felt something shift inside my chest. This wasn't just desire anymore. This wasn't just physical need or forbidden attraction. This was something deeper, something that scared me with its intensity. Afterward, we held each other in the bright morning light, both of us breathing hard, both of us changed by what had just happened. I could feel the weight of the day ahead, the weight of decisions that would need to be made, conversations that would need to be had. But for now, in this moment, I let myself be exactly where I was, in the arms of the man I loved, consequences and complications be damned. Have you ever found yourself caught between duty and desire, between what you should want and what you actually need? What would you do if you were in Violet's position? Stay loyal to a marriage that's lost its spark, or follow your heart toward something that feels real but impossible? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night, and ring that notification bell because trust me, what's coming next will leave you breathless. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.